They called it the county that stopped talking. When I first came across the case files of Ashford County, tucked inside a forgotten drawer at the Chronicle archives, I thought it was a joke, a rural scare story, maybe even one of those elaborate hoaxes local papers used to run in the 80s and 90s to stir up tourism. But the further I read, the less it looked like fiction. The papers were dry, official, police reports, coroner's notes, and missing persons lists. Dates ran in tight sequence. August 12th, 1993. August 14th, August 16th. Always 2 days apart. And always the same note scrawled in the margins by the deputy on duty: no witnesses. No leads. By the end of that August, 12 people were gone. No bodies. No ransom notes. No blood. Just absence. The state police shut the case within 6 months, calling it unsubstantiated hysteria tied to poverty and drug use. But the families never accepted that explanation. And the town itself, Ashford, well, Ashford never came back. By 1997, it was almost completely abandoned, its businesses boarded up, its houses empty. I want to know why. I made the trip to Ashford on a gray February morning. The map showed it as a cluster of winding roads tucked between long stretches of farmland, no more than 45 minutes off the interstate. Still, the drive felt longer, as if the road bent and stretched the closer I got. Most towns, even dying ones, show some pulse when you approach. The gas station at the edge, a diner with faded neon, the sound of a church bell. Ashford had none of that. The sign welcoming me to the county line had been hacked in two, the wood split right down the middle as if someone had swung an axe through it. Past that, silence. The fields stretched wide and brown, the wind moving through their dry husks like breathing. Every so often I catch the glimpse of a roof, collapsed under its own weight, or the hollow frame of a farmhouse leaning to one side. But no people, not a single car. The first time I saw movement, I slammed the brakes. Something darted across the road ahead. Too fast to be a deer, too big to be a fox. It moved on two legs. I could have sworn I saw its arms flailing, pale against the gray air, before it vanished into the rows of dead corn. I sat there, engine idling, heart hammering. For a moment, I considered turning around. But the truth was, I'd already driven 4 hours for this story. And more than that, I wanted the answer. So I kept going. I had arranged to stay in one of the few remaining homes in Ashford, owned by a man named Edward Marsh. He'd lived here all his life, he told me over the phone, and never once considered leaving. His directions led me to a 2-story farmhouse on the edge of town, paint peeled in long strips from its clapboard siding. One of the shutters hung by a single nail, creaking against the wind. But the smoke curling from its chimney meant at least one thing. Someone was inside. Edward opened the door before I knocked. He was tall, shoulders stooped, his face carved with lines that ran deeper than his age. His eyes fixed on me like he was memorizing my features, deciding whether or not I should be allowed to step inside. "You the journalist?" he asked. His voice was gravel. "Yes, from the Chronicle." He didn't shake my hand. Just step back and let me in. The house smelled of wood smoke and something else, something metallic and sour. I tried not to wrinkle my nose as I followed him into the living room. "You'll stay upstairs," he said. "Front left room. Don't go wandering at night." "Why not?" He looked at me then, really looked, as though the question itself marked me as an outsider. "Because that's when they walk," he said. I waited for him to explain, but he didn't. After I settled in, I unpacked the documents I brought. Missing persons flyers, newspaper clippings, police records I'd photocopied from the archive. The disappearances began on August 12th, 1993, with a 16-year-old girl named Laura Jensen. Last seen walking home from her friend's house after dark. 2 days later, an elderly man named Henry Willis vanished from his porch. 2 days after that, a mother and her infant child disappeared from their car, abandoned at the side of the road. No screams reported. No signs of struggle. Just silence. What unsettled me most was not the victims themselves, but the pattern. Always 2 days apart. Always after sunset. By the end of the month, 12 people had vanished. Then, without explanation, the disappearances stopped. No suspects were ever named. No one arrested. And yet, here I was 30 years later with Edward Marsh telling me. That's when they walk. That first night, I woke to the sound of knocking. At first I thought it was part of a dream, the kind where something inside your head echoes into the waking world. But then it came again, steady, deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I sat up in bed, ears straining. The sound wasn't coming from my door, but from the window. The glass rattled. Slowly, I turned my head. A pale face pressed against the pane. The skin was colorless, almost translucent. Its eyes were too wide, too black, the mouth slack and open as though in mid-breath. I couldn't move. My lungs felt frozen, my hands clamped to the sheets. The thing outside didn't move either. Just stared. Then it smiled. Not a warm smile, not a human smile. Its lips stretched back too far, teeth sharp and shining in the moonlight. I tore myself out of bed, stumbling backward into the dresser. The crash must have jolted it, because the face slipped away into the dark. I stayed awake until morning, lights burning. When Edward came down for breakfast, I told him what I saw. He didn't look surprised. They still remember, he said quietly. They never left. That's why people stopped talking about it. I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't explain. The morning after the face in the window, Edward poured me coffee without a word. His hands trembled slightly as he set the mug down, but his eyes never left mine. You saw them, he said. Not a question. I nodded. He sat across from me at the wooden table, leaning forward as if the house itself might overhear us. They come when the town remembers, he said. When someone digs. That's why people stop talking. It was the only way to survive. I asked him what they were. Edward shook his head. Not what? Who? I waited, pen poised above my notebook. They were ours, he said finally. Neighbors. Friends. They just crossed over. Something called them, and once it did, they weren't ours anymore. His words left a chill in the air, thicker than the February frost. Crossed over into what? I asked. You'll see, he muttered. Then he stood and left the table, ending the conversation. Later that day, I walked into the center of Ashford. The town looked like a photograph left too long in the sun. Signs faded to white, shop windows cracked, the schoolhouse roof caved in. The silence wasn't the kind you find in abandoned places. It was heavier, as though the air itself carried the memory of noise and had been forced to forget. I found the old sheriff's office at the end of Main Street. Its door hung ajar, papers scattered across the floor inside. Dust layered everything, but when I ran my fingers over the desk, the surface beneath was strangely clean, as though someone still used it. On the bulletin board were the original missing persons flyers. 12 faces stared back at me, edges curling yellow with age. Laura Jensen, 16. Henry Willis, 72. Margaret Collins, 31, and her infant daughter. On and on. Beneath them, scrawled in a different hand than the flyers themselves, were 3 words. Don't open them. My stomach tightened. I pulled out my recorder, documenting everything, the condition of the building, the flyers, the words. As I spoke into the device, I realized I wasn't alone. There was breathing behind me. Slow, uneven. I turned fast. The hallway was empty, but the breathing didn't stop. It echoed from the walls themselves, as if the building exhaled around me. I didn't stay long after that. Edward told me the town cemetery was still kept, if barely. The families of the missing had buried empty coffins there, hoping for closure that never came. I walked there at dusk, the sun bleeding into the hills, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple. The gate was rusted but swung open without protest. Rows of headstones leaned toward each other like conspirators. Most were cracked, names worn nearly smooth. But the graves of the disappeared were unmistakable, 12 in total, newer than the rest, each marked with the year 1993. Someone had left offerings, flowers long withered, children's toys bleached by sun, a rosary broken in 2. I crouched to read the inscription on Laura Jensen's stone. Our light taken too soon. A shadow moved across the words. I glanced up. There was a figure standing among the graves. At first I thought it was another mourner, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized the body was wrong. It was too long, too thin, its arms hanging past its knees. It tilted its head, watching me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then it vanished. Not into the trees, not into the shadows. It simply wasn't there anymore. I left the cemetery running. That night, Edward finally told me what happened in 1993. We sat by the fire, the only light in the room flickering across his gaunt face. It started with whispers, he said. People heard voices in the fields at night, calling their names. Some ignored them. Some followed. He paused, staring into the flames. Those who followed didn't come back. He took a long drink from his glass, hands shaking. My brother was one of the first. He heard our mother's voice out there. She'd been dead 10 years. He went to her. I never saw him again. His eyes met mine then, sharp and wet. They take the shape of what you want most. Your child, your lover, your parent. That's how they lead you out. And once you step past the edge of town, you belong to them. Who are they? I asked. Edward's voice dropped. The hollowed. The fire cracked, and the shadows on the walls seemed to lean closer. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of singing. It was faint, lilting, a woman's voice carrying through the walls. I sat up, heart thudding. The sound came from outside, drifting through the window. I recognized the tune. My mother used to hum it when I was a child, a lullaby I hadn't thought of in years. The voice called my name. I rose, bare feet on cold wood, and moved toward the window before I even realized what I was doing. The glass fogged with my breath as I leaned close. In the yard below, a figure stood, hand outstretched. It was my mother, her face pale in the moonlight, her eyes soft, her lips shaping my name. I knew it wasn't real. I knew. She'd been dead 6 years. But my body didn't care. My hand was already on the latch. At the last second, a shout tore through the house. "Don't open it!" Edward roared. The figure below flickered like a candle in wind. For a moment its face melted, revealing something long-jawed and eyeless beneath. Then it vanished. I stumbled back, gasping. Edward burst into the room, wild-eyed. "You never opened for them," he hissed. "Never." On the 4th morning, I found a box waiting outside my bedroom door. It was small, wooden, carved with initials I didn't recognize. H.W. The lid had no lock, no latch, just a faint burn mark across its top, as if someone had pressed a hot iron against it. Inside were cassette tapes, 12 of them, each labeled with a date from August 1993. I carried the box downstairs. Edward was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee. When he saw what I held, the color drained from his face. "Where'd you get that?" he whispered. "It was outside my room." He shook his head, muttering under his breath. Then, with hands that shook more than usual, he motioned for me to follow him into the living room. We set up his old tape player on the table. The first cassette clicked into place with a reluctant whir. At first there was only static. Then a voice broke through. "August 12th, midnight. This is Sheriff Wilkes, recording for the county log. Subject: disappearance of Laura Jensen, age 16. The voice was tired, strained. I could hear wind in the background, and something else too, a faint murmuring like dozens of voices overlapping. Search party found nothing. Parents swear they heard her outside the house, calling for them. But no footprints, no signs of entry, just her voice. The tape hissed, then cut off. Edward stared at the machine like it might bite him. "They kept records," he said, "but the state destroyed most of them. Guess some survived." We listened to the next tape, and the next. Each one was worse. A farmer swore he saw his wife standing in the fields, though she'd died 2 years earlier. A child claimed his dead dog barked outside the window until he opened the door. An old woman said her husband returned from the grave to sit on the porch with her. Always the same. A voice, a familiar shape, a promise, and then gone. By the 12th tape, the sheriff's voice had changed. No longer weary, but terrified. I keep hearing them at night. They're inside the station, whispering my name. I told the men to stop answering, but some already have. Once you open the door, they get in. They wear you. The recording ended with a scream. The tape clicked, and the house went silent. I asked Edward what the sheriff meant. They wear you. He didn't answer right away. Just stared into the fire, lips pressed thin. "They're not ghosts," he said finally. "Not in the way you think. They're hollow, empty things. They take whatever face you'll follow. But the longer they stay near, the more they fill up." "Fill up with what?" Edward's gaze shifted to me, sharp as broken glass. With you. His voice cracked like a snap bone. That's how the disappearances happened. Folks didn't just vanish. They got worn. Hollowed out. Their shells still walk. A shiver slid through me. You mean they're still here? The missing. Edward's silence was answer enough. That afternoon, I walked back into town. Something pulled me there. Curiosity, or maybe the faint hope I'd find someone else alive among the ruins. And I did. Near the boarded-up general store, a man leaned against a lamppost. He wore a dark coat, too clean for a place like this. His face was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. "You don't belong here," he said. His voice was smooth, almost kind. "I'm investigating," I told him. "The disappearances." He chuckled, low and dry. "Disappeared, did they? That's one way to say it. Do you know what happened?" I asked. He lifted his head, just enough for me to glimpse his smile. It was too wide. "I know more than you want to." For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But instead he tipped his hat and walked off, vanishing down a side street. When I followed, the street was empty. That night, Edward barred the doors with wooden beams I hadn't seen before. He lit every lamp in the house and sat at the table with a shotgun across his lap. "They'll come stronger now," he muttered. "Because of the tapes? Because you listened." I lay in bed with the recorder on, documenting every creak, every sigh of wind. At 1:17 a.m., it happened again. Knocking, but not on the window this time. On the walls. The sound traveled around the room. Knock, 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 circling me like a predator. Then came the voices. My name, over and over, spoken in my mother's voice. My father's. Friends I hadn't heard from in years. The voices overlapped until they were a storm of familiarity, pressing in from every side. The walls bulged, faintly, as if something pushed from the other side. I pressed my back against the headboard, whispering to myself that it wasn't real, that none of it was real. But then a crack split down the plaster. A pale hand slid through. Long fingers curled into the room, grasping. Another hand followed, then a face, squeezing through the narrow slit of the wall. It was Laura Jensen, 16 years old, exactly as she'd been in the flyer. Her eyes were empty sockets. Her mouth opened, and my name spilled out in my mother's voice. I screamed. The shotgun blasted downstairs. The figure jerked, vanishing back into the wall with a hiss. Edward thundered into the room, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun. "They're inside already," he rasped. "We don't have much time." By dawn, Edward had a plan. "We burn them out," he said. "The hollowed are tied to what's left here, clothes, toys, bones. The things people wouldn't let go of. That's why the town rots, but doesn't die. We torch it all. Maybe we send them back." He looked at me then, eyes bloodshot. "But you need to understand, once we start, they'll fight. And if they get close enough to where you..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I stared at the recorder in my hand. Part of me wanted to leave, to run back to the highway, forget Ashford ever existed. But I couldn't. I'd come for the truth. And the truth was still here. Edward nodded when he saw the resolve on my face. "Then we do it tonight." Edward wasted no time. As soon as the morning frost melted, he led me out into the bones of Ashford. We carried kerosene cans, burlap sacks, and his old shotgun slung across his shoulder. He moved with purpose, as if he'd prepared for this night for years, but never had reason, or courage, to strike. The plan was simple. Torch every object tied to the missing. The graves in the cemetery, the abandoned houses, the belongings left behind. "The hollowed feed on what's left," Edward said. "You burn the tether, you starve them." I didn't ask what would happen if we failed. We started with the Jensen house. It sat on the edge of town, shutters nailed shut, vines clawing up its sides like black veins. The front door groaned as Edward kicked it in. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rot, but there was another smell too, sweet, almost sickly, like fruit left too long in the sun. Laura's room was just as she'd left it. Posters peeling on the walls. A bed neatly made. A stuffed bear slumped against the pillow. Edward doused it all in kerosene. "Wait," I said, my recorder buzzing faintly in my hand. "Listen." At first I thought it was the house settling, but then I heard it clearly, a voice soft as a breath. "Daddy." The bear's head tilted. Its glass eyes gleamed. Edward struck the match. The fire caught fast, swallowing the curtains, racing up the walls. The voice screamed, "Hi!" shrill, not Laura's anymore. The bear jerked and twitched, it seemed splitting, something pale pushing through the stuffing before collapsing into ash. We didn't wait to watch the house fall. By nightfall, 5 houses burned. Flames lit the horizon, painting the dead cornfields red. But with every fire, the hollowed grew angrier. We saw them more often now, pale figures watching from the fields, too thin, too tall. They never came close in daylight, but I felt their hunger in the way the air thickened, the way shadows stretched toward us. At the Willis farm, as Edward poured kerosene across the porch, a shape lurched into view. It was Henry Willis himself, or what was left of him. His eyes were hollow, his jaw slack, his arms trembling as if his bones couldn't quite remember how to hold him upright. His mouth opened, and a wet, broken sound crawled out. "Ed, help me." Edward froze. For a moment, I thought he'd drop the can and run to him. But then his face hardened. "You're not my neighbor," he spat, and he lit the porch. Henry shrieked, his body convulsing, splitting open like brittle wood as the fire consumed him. What crawled out of the shell was worse. Something long and white and faceless, screaming without sound as it burned to nothing. I retched into the dirt. Edward kept walking. We saved the sheriff's station for last. Inside, the walls still bore claw marks, as if something had tried to tear its way out. Papers lay scattered, soaked with age. The missing person's board sagged with damp. Edward poured kerosene across the floor, careful not to meet my eyes. But I was drawn to the desk. Something about it felt wrong. The air colder there, the shadows heavier. I pulled open a drawer. Inside was a badge. Sheriff Wilkes's badge. The metal was warped, blackened as though scorched. When I touched it, a sound rushed into my ears, like hundreds of voices whispering at once. "Let us in," they begged. "Let us in." I dropped the badge. My hand shook. Edward struck another match. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. The flame hit the kerosene, and the station erupted. For a moment, I thought I saw faces in the fire. Laura, Henry, Margaret, screaming, reaching. Then the roof collapsed, sparks showering into the night sky. But as we walked away, the whispering followed. Louder now. Stronger. "They're not leaving," I whispered. Edward's eyes were grim. "No, they're waking." Back at the farmhouse, Edward bolted the doors again. His shotgun leaned against the table, and his hands shook worse than ever. "We did what we could," he muttered. "If that ain't enough, then nothing will be." The night pressed against the windows like a living thing. At 2 a.m., the knocking began. Not on the walls, not on the windows, on the doors. Boom, boom, boom. The beams rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Voices cried out, children, parents, lovers, every voice Edward and I had ever known. Then came silence. A low, scraping sound moved along the house's siding. Slow, deliberate, as though something enormous dragged its body across the walls, circling, circling. Edward cocked the shotgun. "They'll try the roof," he whispered. He was right. Above us, the boards groaned. The ceiling bowed. Something heavy shifted its weight, crawling overhead. Nails squealed as they tore loose. I couldn't breathe. My recorder whined with static in my pocket. Then, with a crash, the ceiling split. A face pressed through the crack. It was Sheriff Wilkes. His eyes burned black, his teeth stretched into a ragged grin. His voice bellowed, not from his throat, but from every wall at once. "We where you." The shotgun roared. The face shattered into smoke. But the house wasn't safe anymore. Edward grabbed my arm. "Basement." We ran. The basement smelled of damp earth and rust. Chains hung from the beams, tools scattered across the floor. Edward slammed the door, shut above us, bolting it. But the hollowed were already inside. I heard them moving, shuffling, scraping, whispering. Their voices echoed from the stone walls. My mother, my father, people I hadn't heard in years. "Come with us," they pleaded. "You'll never be alone." Edward shoved a lantern into my hands. "If they get me, you burn it all," he said. "Promise me." I shook my head. "We'll both make it." But he only smiled, tired and broken. "You don't know Ashford like I do." The lantern flickered. The whispers grew louder, and the floorboards above began to split. The basement ceiling groaned like it was being peeled open by claws. Dust fell in thick clouds, coating my tongue with the taste of rot. Edward shoved the lantern at me, his hands slick with sweat. "Back," he hissed. "Stay behind me." The boards above split, and pale arms punched through, thin, too long, fingers jointed wrong, bending in both directions. They groped at the air, grasping for us. I swung the lantern upward. Light caught on their flesh, and for a moment the hollowed hissed, retreating. Edward fired. The shotgun blast shook the room, shredding wood, sending splinters into the dirt floor. For a second, the arms shriveled, dissolving into smoke. But others followed. Always more. "Run where?" I gasped. Edward's eyes darted to the far corner of the basement, where a rusted coal chute slanted up into darkness. "It'll take us outside. Move." We scrambled over broken tools and fallen beams. Behind us, the hollowed pressed further through the ceiling. Faces followed now, faces that shifted between familiar and monstrous. My father's eyes, my mother's lips, my childhood friend's smile, all of them begging, pleading, "Don't leave us. Don't burn us. We can give you back what you've lost." Edward's voice cracked as he jammed his shoulder against the coal chute's hatch. "You can't give me a goddamn thing." The metal screamed open. Cold night air spilled in. We climbed. We spilled into the open, coughing dust, stumbling into the dead cornfield behind the house. The moon hung heavy and red, casting every stalk in bloodlight, and the hollowed were waiting. Dozens of them, pale shapes shifting between human and not. Some crawled on all fours, their spines bending backward. Others walked stiffly like marionettes. Faces flickered across them. Laura, Henry, Sheriff Wilkes, Margaret, changing and melting as they approached. Edward lifted the shotgun, fired, reloaded, fired again. Each blast tore holes in their bodies, but the hollow didn't fall. Smoke poured from the wounds, reforming, reshaping. "They don't stop," I cried. "They do if you burn him," Edward snapped. "We get to the church." The church. He shoved me forward, eyes wild. That's where it started. Ashford's church loomed at the edge of town, its steeple crooked, its cross snapped in half. Stained glass windows gaped with missing shards, black holes staring outward. The doors groaned as we pushed them open. Inside, pews lay splintered. Candles melted to wax puddles. And at the altar, 12 coffins. Empty coffins, each lid carved with a name. The missing. Edward's voice was barely a whisper. They buried shells here. Not bodies, just what the hollowed left behind. I stepped closer. The coffins were cracked open, their insides black with rot. But as I stared, I saw something shift inside them. Not corpses. Shadows. They writhed, pressed against the wood as if desperate to escape. "They're tethered here," Edward said. "This is where we ended." He tossed me the kerosene can. "Pour." I splashed fuel across the coffins, the pews, the altar. Edward lit a match, his hands shaking so bad it nearly dropped. The flame kissed the kerosene, and the church roared to life. Shadows screamed. They surged upward, pouring from the coffins, taking form. Faces twisting, mouths gaping. The hollowed shrieked, their bodies lashing like smoke in the wind. The building shook as though it might tear itself apart. I cover my ears, but the voices pierced through, pleading, begging, promising. "Stay with us. Just one step. We can make you whole." My mother's voice cut through the din, sweet and soft. "Come home." For a heartbeat, I almost stepped into the flames. Edward grabbed my arm, yanking me back. "Don't listen," he roared. The roof cracked. Fire poured through the rafters. The hollowed writhed, faces melting, arms clawing the air. One by one, they shriveled in the firelight, burning to ash. The church collapsed. We stumbled into the night, choking on smoke, the sky behind us lit with orange flame. For the first time, the town was silent. We stood in the ruins until dawn. The fire smoldered, the church nothing but charred bones. No whispers, no faces. Edward sank to his knees, shotgun slipping from his grasp. "It's over," he whispered. "After 30 years, it's finally over." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the hollowed were gone. But in the back of my mind, a single thought gnawed. If we burned their tethers, what happened to their voices? Where did they go? We returned to the farmhouse, exhausted. Edward collapsed into a chair, his eyes already closing. I set my recorder on the table, rewinding the last tape I'd made, the chaos of the church burning. Static filled the air. Then voices. Not the hollowed. Not screams. One voice. Clear. Calm. My own. Stay, it whispered. Stay in Ashford. You'll never leave. The tape clicked, and from the window, a face smiled back at me. The face outside the window didn't move. Its skin shimmered faintly, pale as wax. Its eyes were black pits, and yet they reflected my own image as though I were looking in a mirror. Edward snored softly in the chair beside the fire, spent from the night's ordeal. He didn't see it, didn't hear the faint tapping that followed. Tap, tap, tap. My name hissed across the glass in my own voice. Come out. The recorder clicked on by itself. My voice filled the room, repeating the same two words over and over. Come out, come out, come out. I slammed it off, heart hammering. The face didn't vanish. It just smiled. By morning, Edward was awake again, rubbing his temples as though the night had bled into his skull. I told him about the face, about the voice on the recorder. He didn't look surprised. They've marked you, he said flatly. Mark me. They've learned your voice. That's how it starts. They were pieces of you. First your sound, then your face, then... He trailed off. Then what? Edward stared into his coffee. Then there's not much of you left to wear. Later that day, I walked back into town alone. Edward begged me not to, but something pulled me, like a thread winding tighter in my chest. Main Street was silent, ash still curling from the ruins of the church. The fire hadn't spread. It was as though the town itself refused to burn. Near the general store, I saw him again. The stranger with the wide-brimmed hat. He leaned against the lamppost, smiling that too wide smile. You've done well, he said. My throat went dry. What are you? He tipped his hat, revealing eyes that shimmered like oil on water. I'm what waits when the fires burn out. I stepped back. You're one of them. His smile widened. No, they're mine. The words crawled over my skin like ants. What do you want? I whispered. He leaned close, his breath colder than the February wind. Just to wear you a while. When I blinked, he was gone. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. My mother at the stove, humming. My father in his chair, newspaper in hand. Everything perfect, everything whole. When I reached for them, their faces slid away. Skin sloughed off like wet paper, leaving hollow sockets, stretched grins. I woke screaming. Edward shook me, his hands rough. They're inside your head now, he muttered. You can't let them in further. If they get deep enough, you'll open the door for them without even knowing. I pressed my palms to my temples, but the voices were already there. Whispering, singing, wearing. The farmhouse bathroom had a cracked mirror above the sink. I avoided it for days, afraid of what I might see. But one morning, I couldn't resist. I leaned close, studying my reflection. At first it was normal, tired eyes, hollow cheeks. Then the mouth moved. Not mine. You're almost ready, it said. The glass spiderwebbed as I punched it, shards raining into the sink. My reflection laughed, even as the pieces fell. Edward burst in, grabbing my wrists. Don't look at them, he barked. Every glance gives them more. My hands bled. My reflection smiled from the shards on the floor. That night, Edward finally told me the truth. Back in '93, when it started, I didn't just watch my brother go, he said. His voice was thick, heavy. I opened the door for him. I thought it was my mother calling. I wanted it to be her. And when I saw her face, I let her in. He stared into the fire, the flames painting his hollow cheeks. My brother never came back, but she did. For weeks, she wore me down. Every night, I let her in a little more. She had my mother's laugh, her hands, her smell. I nearly followed her into the fields. He looked at me then, eyes red. I survived because I stopped believing. You hear me? That's the only way. Stop believing in what you see, or they'll wear you too. I tried. God, I tried. But belief is slippery. It lives in your bones. When I heard my mother's voice, I believed. When I saw my father's hand reach through the window, I believed. And when the recorder played back my own voice whispering secrets I'd never spoken aloud, I believed more than ever. Edward watched me with suspicion now. Every time I twitched, every time I stared too long at the shadows, his hand hovered near the shotgun. "They're in you," he muttered. Not much time left. On the 8th night, I woke to the sound of chains. Edward stood over me, his face lit by the lantern's glow. He shackled my wrists to the bed frame, his jaw clenched. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. "You're not you anymore," he said. His voice broke. "I can't risk it. I'm still me." He shook his head, tears carving lines down his cheeks. "They wore my brother. I won't let them wear you too." The door slammed. His footsteps faded, and in the silence that followed, a voice whispered from the corner of the room. My voice. "Don't worry. We'll get out." The chains bit into my wrists. The more I struggled, the tighter they seemed to draw, iron teeth gnawing at bone. The farmhouse was silent except for the crack of the fire and Edward pacing somewhere below. But in the corner of my room, the shadows writhed. "You don't need him," my own voice whispered. "You don't need anyone." A pale hand slid from the darkness. It was mine, but not mine. The fingers bent backward, every knuckle wrong. The nails scratched faintly across the wooden floor. I shut my eyes. Not real. But when I opened them, the hand gripped the bed frame. The chains rattled as I jerked away. The shadow me leaned close, its face forming out of the dark. My face, my eyes, my mouth, smiling wider than human lips could stretch. "You're ready," it whispered. The door slammed open. Edward stood with the shotgun raised, his eyes wild. "Get away from him." The shadow dissolved into smoke. Edward rushed in, fumbling with the chains, his hands trembling. "They've already got too deep," he muttered. "God forgive me." He didn't finish. Just dragged me to my feet, half carrying me toward the stairs. The farmhouse groaned around us, beams creaking, windows rattling. The air itself pulsed like the walls had lungs. Edward shoved me into the kitchen, bolting the door behind us. "They won't stop now," he rasped. "They'll take the whole house if they have to." As if on cue, the floor rippled beneath my feet. Boards swelled, then split, pale fingers thrusting through the cracks. The ceiling bulged, faces pressing from the plaster. Laura, Henry, my parents, my own. "Wear him," they chanted in 1,000 voices. "Wear him." Edward fired upward. The ceiling shrieked, smoke bursting from the wounds. "Downstairs," he snapped. "Root cellar. It's stone, they can't shift it as easy." We fled into the narrow stairwell, the house shuddering like an animal trying to shake us off its back. The root cellar smelled of earth and mildew, its stone walls slick with damp. Barrels leaned against one another, lids cracked. Edward lit the lantern, setting it on a crate. His face looked carved from shadow. "They've chosen you," he said. "Means you're the door. Once they wear you fully, they'll walk the earth again." My throat closed. "Then kill me. Don't let them." His hands tightened on the shotgun. For a moment, I thought he would. But he lowered it, tears shining in the lamplight. "I don't have it in me. Not after my brother. I'll find another way." The walls trembled. Dust sifted down. Voices leaked through the cracks, soft, sweet, almost tender. "Eddie," one whispered. A woman's voice. "Eddie, it's your mama. Let me see you, son." Edward's jaw clenched. His finger hovered near the trigger. "Not her," I begged. But he was already staring at the wall, his breath shallow. The stone bulged inward, crumbling. A pale figure stepped through. She looked like his mother, short, frail, her dress faded, her smile warm. "Eddie," she said softly, arms outstretched. "You did so good, baby. You kept the house safe. Come home now." Edward's face broke. His knees buckled. "Ma," he whispered. The figure tilted her head, her smile too wide, her eyes too black. I shouted, "It's not her." But Edward was already moving, shotgun slipping from his hands. He stumbled toward her, tears streaming down his face. The hollowed arms opened wider, joints snapping backward, mouth splitting into a grin that carved halfway across her face. Edward embraced her, and she wore him. His scream filled the cellar. His body convulsed, bones cracking, skin stretching. His face melted, reshaped, until the thing standing before me wore both their faces at once. "Thank you." it whispered in Edward's voice. Then it smiled at me. I grabbed the shotgun, firing wildly. The blast tore chunks of smoke and flesh, but the hollowed only staggered, reforming, Edward's eyes staring through me. "Don't fight us," it whispered. "You'll be with your family again. You'll never be alone." I fled up the stairs, the house quaking as though the hollowed's laughter lived in its beams. The front door burst open before me, slamming against the wall. Outside, the town was awake. Dozens of figures filled the streets, faces flickering, bodies shuddering. Every missing soul from 1993 returned and waiting. And in the center, the stranger in the hat. He tipped it toward me, smiling that oil-slick smile. "You've carried them well," he said. "Now let's finish the wearing." The entire town stood waiting. Men, women, children, the faces of the missing, their eyes black pits, their mouths stretched into smiles too wide. Their bodies shimmered as if stitched together from smoke and memory. The February wind cut sharp through my shirt, but the air around them was colder still, each breath frosting my lips. The stranger in the hat spread his arms wide, as if presenting me. "Here he is," he said, his voice carrying like a sermon. "Our door." The hollowed murmured in unison, a single, low chant. "Door, door, door." I backed away, the shotgun trembling in my hands. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The stranger smiled. "Not want. Need. You've already opened enough cracks for them to crawl through. Just one more step, and the wearing is complete." I raised the shotgun, aiming at his chest. "Stay back." He didn't flinch. "You can't kill what doesn't bleed," he said calmly. "But you can bargain. Shall we bargain?" The hollowed swayed like tall grass in the wind, their voices humming low, sweet, hypnotic. "What kind of bargain?" I rasped. The stranger's grin widened. "Let us wear you, fully and forever, and we'll give you what you want most." My stomach lurched. "And what's that?" He leaned close, whispering against my ear. "Your mother's voice, your father's hand, your childhood nights without fear. We'll give it back, and you'll never know the dark again." For a moment, God help me, I wanted it. But Edward's scream echoed through my head, his bones breaking as he was worn. I pulled the trigger. The stranger's chest exploded into smoke. He staggered back, laughing as the wound stitched itself closed. "You'll have to do better than that," he said. I ran, down Main Street, past the smoldering church, past the empty storefronts. The hollowed moved after me, their feet silent on the pavement, their bodies flickering in and out of the dark. They didn't hurry. They didn't have to. Every corner I turned, they were already there. Faces I knew, faces I loved, faces that were mine. "You can't run from yourself," they whispered. The houses leaned inward, their windows like eyes. The whole town was folding around me, shepherding me back toward the stranger. No escape. Unless the fields. If the stories were true, everything started in the fields. Maybe it could end there too. The frozen grass crunched beneath my boots as I stumbled into the open. The moon hung low and heavy, the sky choked with clouds. The air was thick with whispers. The hollowed ringed the fields, a black wall of bodies. The stranger stood at the center, his hat casting shadows that shouldn't exist. "Here it is," he said, "where the first wearing began, where it will finish." The ground quivered beneath me, soil splitting open. Pale hands clawed up from the earth, hundreds of them, reaching. I fired into the pit, the blast swallowed by smoke. The hands kept reaching. A figure stumbled from the line of hollowed. Edward, his face torn, half his body melted into smoke. His voice was two voices speaking over one another. "Don't fight them," he gasped. "It's easier if you let go." My heart clenched. "Edward, it's not you." His mouth split into a smile too wide. "Isn't it?" He lunged, smoke pouring from his eyes. I pulled the trigger. His body blew apart, dissolving into ash that drifted back into the soil. The hollowed screamed as one, a howl that shook the fields. The ground tore open. From the pit rose something vast, a shape without edges, a body made of faces, all smiling, all mine. Its voice was thunder and silk, filling every corner of my mind. "You are the door." The shotgun slipped from my hands. Every face I'd ever loved leaned toward me. My parents, Edward, Laura, Henry, even my own reflection. They spoke in perfect unison. Let US where you. Let US be. The world tilted. The sky bent. My body felt like paper, ready to tear. I screamed, clawing at my skin as if I could rip them out. But the more I fought, the deeper they dug. I felt my mouth stretch, my eyes blacken. My own voice joined theirs, chanting, begging. Door, door, door. The stranger stood over me, his hand outstretched. All you have to do, he said softly, is stop resisting. Step through. Be warned. And in return, you will never know loneliness again. The hollowed leaned closer, their smiles infinite. I looked at the shotgun lying in the dirt. One shell left. Either I gave in, or I ended it here. The faces shifted, showing me everything I'd lost. My mother's eyes, my father's hands, Edward's laugh. My finger trembled on the trigger. Smoke filled my lungs. The hollowed screamed. And then, I'm writing this on my own time because the sheriff told me to leave it alone. Said Hale probably ran off like the rest. But after what I saw, I can't put it down to paper as just ran off. The house out on Ashford Fields is ash, burned down to the foundation. But no fire crew was called. No reports of smoke. When I drove out there, the earth was still warm, blackened like something burned from beneath. Inside the cellar, we found chains bolted to the wall. The iron was warped, bent outward, as if something tore its way free. No sign of Hale's body, but we did find his tape recorder, half melted, buried in the dirt. They're here. All of them. The whole town. The hollowed. I can hear them in my head. They're calling me the door. Edward. God, Edward, I'm sorry. They wore him. They wore them all. I don't know how long I can keep fighting. The stranger says if I let go, I won't be alone anymore. It would be so easy. But if anyone finds this, don't come back here. Don't let them out. Don't let them wear you. I'd rather. The tape ended there. Sheriff locked it away in evidence, said it wasn't my concern. But I swear, some nights I hear it playing in the office. Not the blast, just the voices, whispering low. And the worst part? They sound like people I know. Like my wife. Like my little girl. Like me. If this file is ever opened again, know this. Ashford Fields is not safe. The ground still breathes. The hands still reach. And the voices still call for the door.